Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everybody. Come on, it's a nice rainy night out there. One more time. Good evening, everybody. That's what I like to hear. Hey, I am so proud to welcome you all to the 13th Annual Golden Goose Award ceremony. My name is Sudip Parikh, and I have the privilege of serving as the CEO of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, or AAAS, an executive publisher of Science. And we are thrilled that you all could be here on this night of celebration. No amount of rain out there can dampen our celebration of science and the federally funded scientific research that makes advancement possible. And we're going to honor some of the individuals behind those impacts. AAAS is proud to be a Golden Goose Award founding organization because we very much value, and see the value in telling stories. You can say a lot of numbers, you can give a lot of metrics, but nothing beats stories on the scientists that take chances, that try things that people think are silly, and turn them into something amazing. And it's these reasons that it's absolutely vital to have celebrations like this, particularly in the Library of Congress, but also particularly across the street from the building over there. And it's incredibly important, and I'm so proud that we have members of Congress who not only like seeing the flyer, but want to be here in support of this incredible occasion. So I want to congratulate our creative and curious honorees and welcome all of you who are here to support their achievements. And now I'm going to turn to my friend, the Association of American Universities President, Barbara Snyder. Barbara?
Thank you, Sudip. I'm so delighted to be here with you tonight. I'm Barbara Snyder, and I have the privilege of serving as president of the Association of American Universities. The AAU is an organization of 69 of America's leading research universities, plus 2 in Canada. We're very proud of all of them, and we helped found the Golden Goose Award in 2012. We are so proud to be a founder and a continuing supporter of these awards, and proud to partner with AAAS and Sudip. We at AAU understand that pure, curiosity-driven scientific research can yield discoveries that not only advance science, but make our nation healthier, stronger, and more prosperous. As is so often the case, this year's Golden Goose awardees all have connections to research universities. And so much of the research that our universities conduct is supported by federal funding. The federal government's ongoing commitment to fund university-based scientific research has repeatedly proven to be a very wise investment in helping our nation achieve its priorities. Now more than ever, we must affirm our commitment to the Government-University Research Partnership, which has helped keep the United States at the forefront of scientific advancement for my entire lifetime. You will soon hear the stories of the 7 individuals we are honoring tonight. Having learned more about them today at lunch, I can attest to the fact that they are an accomplished and really inspiring group. Moreover, their stories are examples of how funding for fundamental research that the federal government provides pays off, even when the topic might sound completely esoteric. I want to conclude by saying thank you again to AAAS for continuing to put on the Golden Goose Award ceremony and to making sure that these stories get told. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Barbara. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our Master of Ceremonies for the evening, Frank Sesno. Frank is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and currently serves as Director of Strategic Initiatives and Professor at the School of Media and Public Affairs at the George Washington University. He's also GW's Executive Director of the Alliance for a Sustainable Future. And we are incredibly grateful to have him as a longtime supporter of the Golden Goose Award. Thank you, Frank, and please take the stage.
Thank you very much, Sudip and Barbara. Thank you for all you do, and thanks to all of you for coming. This is a pretty darn good audience. Look at this on a rainy day. And to those of you who are joining us online, welcome, welcome. You are going to enjoy a remarkable evening, I am absolutely sure. This is the 10th time I've had the privilege to MC this ceremony. I just keep coming back for a good thing. I'm thrilled to be back this year. And let me tell you why this is so important. Sudip, as you were saying, stories matter. I've done that all my life, tell stories. It's how we connect, it's how we inform, it's how we build understanding, and it's how we build empathy. And in this world of science, explaining complexity, explaining uncertainty, connecting to people, and conveying the excitement of discovery, the breakthrough that people do, is the best story you can tell. So thank you all, and I'm delighted to be here. The Golden Goose Award celebrates silly-sounding, serendipitous science that has returned serious benefits to society, sometimes unpredictable benefits to society. Tonight we'll honor 3 teams of researchers whose federally funded work has done just that. It may have seemed silly, odd, or obscure at the time, but it made significant impact. We have a lot of folks to thank, and please, let's do that together. Start by thanking all of you in the audience who've submitted Golden Goose nominations over the course of the year and the years, and have shared these stories of science. Nominations for the Golden Goose Award can come from anyone, so if you have a story to tell, please share it at goldengooseaward.org. Nominations are evaluated by a distinguished independent panel of scientists and science professionals who comprise the Golden Goose Award Selection Committee, and we're thankful to have several of them in the audience tonight, and would you join me in thanking them for what they do. I have a really special thank you for former Congressman Jim Cooper of Tennessee, who helped establish the Golden Goose Award in 2012 and has always understood the power of science and storytelling and the value of stories in science. So thank you, Jim Cooper. In addition to AAAS, which currently houses the award in AAU, which housed it in its early years and continues to support it, the Golden Goose Award is supported by many other organizations and institutions without whose backing this night and the award itself would not be possible. So I want to thank those sponsors whose support has made the 2024 award what it is. The first Golden Goose Award champion organization is Wiley, which made a generous multi-year commitment back in 2022. You'll hear from Wiley a bit later in the program. Our other champion organization is Google. You may have heard of them, which has its own origins in federally funded research. This year's partner organization is the Charlotte A. Berg Memorial Fund, and this year's contributing organizations are the American Geophysical Union, the American Society for Microbiology, the Association of American Universities, Patel, IEEE USA, Microsoft, the Task Force on American Innovation, and Vanderbilt University. We also appreciate the support of our many supporter organizations listed on your program. So will you join me, please, in thanking those who have made tonight possible. So there are not many places and people and organizations that can say this, but the Golden Goose Award has always had strong bipartisan support in Congress. This is a good thing. We're pleased to have several of our congressional supporters here tonight. We call them the gaggle. And we're going to ask each of them to say a few brief words and come join us. First, I'd like to invite on the stage a Congresswoman from Oregon who serves on the House committees that focus on science, space, technology, education, and the workforce. She also co-founded and co-chairs the Congressional STEAM Caucus, bringing the arts and sciences together. She's a longtime supporter. We're delighted to welcome her back on the stage. Please join me in welcoming Representative Suzanne Bonamici.
Thank you, Frank. It's really great to be back at the Golden Goose Awards. What a wonderful, wonderful event. Thank you to AAAS and all the partners and supporters. Thank you for mentioning Father Goose, my former colleague, Jim Cooper. Congratulations to all the awardees. This is the 13th Golden Goose Award celebration that does celebrate bipartisan support for research, which is so important, but also to recognize the value of scientific discovery and creativity. And as a senior member of the Science Committee, I know we can't solve the next moonshot challenge or make the next breakthrough discovery without the expertise of scientists. And over the years, we've recognized federally funded research about so many different things. And it's fun to list them because we don't often get to say these words as a member of Congress. Fluorescent protein, marshmallow tests. One year we had both the honeybee algorithm and the sex life of the screwworm fly. And this year, penguins and poop, right? Don't get to say that very much as a member of Congress. We've had frogs, chickens, llamas, snails, and the blood of a horseshoe crab. But really, these Golden Goose Awards remind us that scientific discoveries may sometimes sound odd or seem obscure or unconventional, but can lead to something significant. And that's the story we're here to tell. The discoveries evolve from curiosity-driven basic research, the phase of scientific exploration with high risk and great potential. It takes courage and confidence to commit to that research, not knowing where the end may be, but many intended breakthroughs have changed daily life. Laser technology, MRI imaging, CRISPR gene editing, there's just so many examples. And these investments in foundational research and early STEAM education, that's, as you heard, STEM plus the arts for creative thinking, can benefit public health, national security, strengthen the economy, and address climate change in so many unanticipated and creative ways. I do want to note that Nobel Prize-winning scientists are 2.85 times more likely than the average scientist to have an artistic craft or hobby, just so you know that. So we do have significant challenges facing the country and the world, and to address them, we need creative thinking and this storytelling that we focus on today, and of course the science. And by telling stories, the awardees help to inspire the next generation of scientists. They make a very good case for federal research, and they strengthen America's scientific leadership. So congratulations again to all the awardees. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your work. Thank you for illustrating the tremendous value of federal research, especially in funny sounding projects. Thank you and enjoy the evening.
Thank you very much. Next, we'd like to welcome Senator Todd Young of Indiana. Senator Young played a key role in the crafting and passage of the CHIPS and Science Act, continues to be a champion of U.S. innovation and competitiveness here and throughout this country. Senator Young, we are delighted you're here. Please join us.
Well, good evening. It's great to be with everyone, this group of doers and dreamers and scholars and builders. It inspires me. It really inspires me, and I want to thank you. I want to thank you scientists for your amazing research, even if it's occasionally crazy and hard to defend. It's always important. It's always, always important, even if it's misunderstood by people like me or others. As many of you know, it's an election year. And occasionally that leads to disputes. It can, unfortunately, at times lead to division. But there's one thing that all of you should know, Republicans and Democrats on the Hill can agree on. It's the importance of research. It's important because it creates jobs. It's important because it leads to life-saving discoveries and improves our quality of life and our material welfare. It's important because knowledge matters, and expanding the bounds of knowledge is a good, I would argue, in and of its own. So please accept my gratitude on behalf of my colleagues, Republican and Democrat alike. This is an exciting time. It's an exciting time for me personally. I've been involved in the CHIPS and Science Act, and hopefully in coming years we can start to fund the science portion very generously. Oh, please, I'm not much for gratuitous applause lines. But leave here knowing that the impact of your work really matters. It has an outsized impact on the United States. We appreciate that. Keep up the good work. God bless.
Thank you very much, Senator. We hadn't noticed it was an election year, so thank you for reminding us of that. You know, it's a little daunting to introduce all these members of Congress and this kind of thing. You get used to it after a while when you've been in town for a while, but this one is particularly daunting because I'm now happy to invite up Congress's only PhD physicist and a champion for sustained federal investment in scientific research. He co-chairs the Inventions Caucus, the R&D Caucus, and the National Labs Caucus. Please join me in welcoming Illinois Congressman Bill Foster.
Well, hello there. Well, for those of you who don't know me after all this time, I'm Congressman Bill Foster. I sometimes introduce myself as saying I represent 100% of the strategic reserve of physicists in the United States Congress. Because for 23 years, I was a high-energy particle physicist and accelerator designer at Fermi National Accelerator Lab. But what I wanted to talk about today, you know, I had a chance to have a meeting this afternoon with one of the awardees, Jeff Hinton. And what struck me is the memory of just how bad it is to be working on something that was stupid, and obviously stupid. And everyone would tell you it was stupid and it was never going to work. You know, I refer, of course, to the United States Congress. But this is what, you know, at Fermilab we went through this. You know, the greatest achievement of Fermilab from the accelerator point of view is the superconducting synchrotron. And so for more than a decade, Fermilab was busy building, you know, you had these accelerators, big accelerators almost never work. All right, and then superconducting devices almost never work. And we thought, okay, we'll just make the biggest superconducting accelerator that had never been built. And you'd go and you'd give talks over at CERN, and they get, you guys are crazy. This is never going to work. You're going to wreck the lab. And then it worked, and we discovered the top quark, and it was all wonderful. And then everyone kind of forgets about all the times that they laughed at you and made fun of you. And actually, when I was talking to Jeff, I mentioned the thing that he'd been working on, which was using neural networks to simulate the brain to try to get somewhere near artificial intelligence. You know, that's something that we tried and discarded at Fermilab back in the 1990s. We were programming neural networks on I think on VAX 780s, which had 2.5 million megaflops of computing power, which and so that's one of the reasons. And then, of course, we're missing a lot of the, you know, the brilliant insights into how to actually make back propagation work. That really is the reason that everyone celebrates Jeffrey and his collaborators now. But it is, you know, and we tried it then, and when we were doing it, we found what is now called the explainability problem. We said, okay, let's say we published a paper that says we have discovered a new subatomic particle because our neural network says so. I mean, how do you even read such a paper? You know, how can it even be wrong? And so now, of course, you know, I'm the last session of Congress, I was chairing the AI task force in financial services, and we ran into exactly the same thing. If someone tells you you cannot, your mortgage is denied because our neural network says so, that's a completely unacceptable answer. And you know, it's sort of nice to have smart people like Jeffrey forcing us to think about this stuff decades in advance, and so that there can be enough collective wisdom in the scientific enterprise, so that when it becomes, you know, one of the existential questions of our time, that we have as much preparation as we can. I'd also like to say something about the second thing. Well, actually, one more thing about neural networks. So I touched it once back in the 90s. I touched it again back in 2010, 2011, when I lost an election, all right? And I lost in the Tea Party wave. And anyway, when you lose in the election, you sort of go through different stages of mourning, and then eventually, you know, the heck with democracy and the heck with people of Illinois and so on. And then you'd say, okay, but what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And write down a list. And number 2 on that list, you know, behind, unfortunately, returning to Congress, was to use neural networks and the webcam to look into a student's face to find out if they got it. Because, you probably mostly all tutored someone, and you explain it to them, and you look in their face, and if they've got it. And so at the time, I went and downloaded these software development kits for emotion recognition, and, they pretty much sucked because they didn't really have the breakthroughs in neural networks that made it work. And now they knock it out of the park. I mean, you in real time can just tell you exactly what is going on in a person's face for sure, and to a large extent their minds, and that has got policy implications beyond belief. And there are people who are going to make really good AI tutors that are going to, put a lot of professors out of jobs. But I won't go down there. But I just want to say so this is, it's just really great to have. But I have one complaint about the whole discussion of this, is that people always talking about inflection points. Okay, there has not been an inflection. An inflection point is the change of the second derivative, right? It is going from a deceleration to acceleration or vice versa. And the political world doesn't use that correctly. An inflection point. All right, I just want to make that point. That it's been a long time since there's been an inflection point in neural networks and AI. It has been accelerating continuously for the last 20 years plus. But I don't want to say nothing about the other ones. I'll just say one thing about this whole business of studying animal poop. When I was a kid, my dad, who was a scientist and a civil rights lawyer, had one of the biggest life lists of birds. He was a big birder and had one of the biggest life lists. And as a little child, he would take us down inside these pine woods in Wisconsin and look at owl pellets, which are these things that are regurgitated by owls. And we'd take them apart and count the number of different dead animals in them. This wasn't poop, but it was, it's whatever. And it's just so wonderful. So it did not seem unnatural that there were people who spent their career studying animal excrement. And it leads also to the last thing I want to say, is the cultural benefits of having just this wide discourse. I have one of my ambitions in Congress is to use in floor debate. There's a wonderful word called coprolite. Now, how many of you know what coprolite is? It's a fossilized piece of poop, all right? And so I want to have the opportunity before I leave Congress to use that in floor debate and in ways that you can imagine. And I'll close just by once you succeed at something, it's very often they sort of forget your name, and we should never forget Jim Cooper. He was one of the really smart guys. When I entered Congress, say, "Oh, Foster, you're a pretty smart guy. You should meet Jim Cooper." And what he has done here is going to have a lasting impact. And he got gerrymandered out of a district and is no longer in Congress. But it is still, he has done a lot of good for the scientific enterprise, and we should never forget his name when you convene every year for this. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Thanks to our bipartisan group of congressional supporters. So grateful for your support and for the way you articulate it. We're very pleased to have the President's Chief Advisor on Science and Technology, Director of the White House Office of Science Technology Policy, Awardee Prabhakar, joining us. She's an engineer and applied physicist, and prior to her role at OSTP, served as the Director of DARPA, Director of NIST. Please join me in welcoming Director Prabhakar.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you to Sudeep and Barbara and your organizations, the other hosts, for this important and really wonderful event. It's my great privilege to say congratulations from the White House to the Golden Goose Award winners for this year. I get to work for a president who lights up whenever we talk about science and technology, and he is very fond of saying that America is a country that can be described in a single word, and that word is possibilities. And that's what we all get to do. And in fact, our modern world is shaped by the possibilities that federally funded research and development has brought forth. It's so integral to our lives. Think about it. If you use GPS to route around traffic in the rain that we're experiencing, every time you stream a movie over the internet, I'm protected by an mRNA vaccine against the COVID virus. I hope many of you are too. I have a friend who has many, many, many extra years of life despite a terrible cancer that he has because of a therapy that he was able to receive. Think about the solar panels on roofs. Think about the clean air that we breathe. Think about how we understand the rich biodiversity of our beautiful blue planet. Every one of these things is only possible because of federally funded R&D. That's how integral it is to our lives. Well, tonight we are here to celebrate one part of federal R&D that is absolutely essential, and that is the support for fundamental research. And every one of these Golden Goose stories is unique and beautiful in its own way. I personally was struck by the fact that 2 of them involve birds, which seems perfect for the Golden Goose Award. And tonight we're here to celebrate the heroic researchers who did this dazzling work. I also want to take a minute and just recognize the many other people who make that possible. And it starts with our members of Congress and their staffs. None of this would have happened without the support over many, many years, as well as the people who work in federal research agencies, the leaders of those organizations and their employees. It takes a lot behind the scenes to make sure that we get the resources to the people who can make these beautiful stories really come to life. So tonight we're going to celebrate work from the past, but I think as we look at it, it's also very clear that these kinds of investments and this kind of research must continue for our future. Vice President Harris has called our times a moment of profound opportunity. So thanks to all of you, everyone in this room, for all that you are doing to create and realize the opportunities of our time. Thank you.
Director Prabhakar, I have to say to you that your office and your calling, you contribute many, many things. But a few years ago, I had a member of OSTP come to a class of mine. And I swear to you, I did not write this for her. But what she said to my students was, speaking about climate change, we don't have a science problem, she said, we have a communications problem. And that too points to the stories that we have to tell about the progress that we can make that you so brilliantly captured. Thank you very much. Finally this evening, I'd like to give a warm welcome to the director of the National Institutes of Health, Monica Bertinoli. Last year, she became the 17th director of NIH. A surgical oncologist by training, she previously served as the director of the National Cancer Institute. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Bertinoli.
So let me begin by thanking our members of Congress attending today. It's so important and meaningful for us to see your support, to have you here, Senator Todd Young, Representative Suzanne Bonamici, and Representative Bill Foster. Thank you so much. Thank you to the Association for the Advancement of Science, the Association of American Universities for organizing and hosting the 13th Annual Golden Goose Award Ceremony. And thank you to all of you who are here with us tonight because you value the wonderful work of science in the service of humanity. We are here to celebrate quirky, wonderful, fabulous scientific success. To this year's winners, with hindsight, of course, you are always destined for greatness. But we know that turning inspiration into accomplishment is almost always a long and bumpy road, even when it has been peer-reviewed and everyone knows it's just fabulous already. Tonight, we acknowledge both the brilliance and the hard work it took to produce the outstanding results worthy of a Golden Goose Award, and we are so grateful for the persistence and collaborative spirit that allowed you to prove all of your detractors wrong. And let me just give you one thing to remember, for you especially. When they were all talking behind your back, They were behind you for a reason. Congratulations.
I want to direct your attention now, please, to the screen for a short message from Jesse Wiley, chair of Wiley's board of directors. Wiley is a global knowledge company and a leader in research, publishing, and knowledge solutions. It's a leading sponsor of this award.
Good evening. I'm Jesse Wiley, chair of the board at Wiley. As a knowledge company and trusted leader in research and learning for over 200 years, Wiley is unwavering in its commitment to enabling science and innovation around the world. I'm sorry I can't join you in person for this wonderful event, but virtually, I'm delighted to congratulate tonight's distinguished winners to celebrate their exceptional accomplishments. Year after year, the Golden Goose Awards demonstrate how immensely impactful scientific research can be. Even if at inception the benefits seem unclear, downright silly, or forgive me, a wild goose chase. The award helps the public understand the tangible benefits that federally funded research brings to society. It demonstrates and reminds us that by investing in research, we invest in a future that promises to revolutionize industries, improve lives, and solve some of the world's most urgent challenges. We at Wiley are thrilled to support these vivid stories of discovery and the researchers behind them, which serve to inspire appreciation for research and science, as well as an awareness of the importance of curiosity, outside-the-box thinking, and persistence. Once again, I want to express my congratulations to these remarkable pioneers. On behalf of Wiley, we thank you for your outstanding contributions. Tonight, in celebrating your achievements, I invite us all to recommit ourselves to the tireless pursuit of knowledge and the transformative power of scientific research. Thank you.
I like those words, curiosity, outside-the-box thinking, and persistence. Before we move on to the next part of our program, how about a few shout-outs to those in the audience and joining us through our live stream. First, to previous Golden Goose awardees and any family members, previous winners we have joining us tonight in person or virtually. Thanks to you. Golden Goose Award has honored over 80 researchers who've discovered solutions and treatments, as you've heard, for a variety of illnesses and autoimmune disorders, led the foundational research which brought us COVID-19 vaccines, transformed society across the board with remarkable new technologies. As I mentioned earlier, we're joined by senior leaders from the National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation, National Science Board, White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, State Department, and other agencies represented by people in the audience here tonight. And to all the public servants who are working hard here on Capitol Hill, in government agencies, here and across the country, around the world, thanks for all you do. Would you join me in thanking one another and everybody else? So now it gets really good, because now we start diving into the science, the discovery, and the personalities of our awardees this evening. So we'll start this off, kick this off with another annual Golden Goose tradition, our documentary video. This will help you get to know the 2024 Golden Goose awardees. You'll meet them in person in a bit, but here's some of their story.
Curiosity is kind of the core of what put me into science. It's the idea that you could discover new things, and especially discover new things about animals. The red-cockaded woodpecker is not impressive physically. What is special about them is their ecology and their social system.
Jeff Walters has spent decades studying red-cockaded woodpeckers, which everyone just calls RCWs. I wanted to work with Jeff as my advisor because of the quality of his research. We all learned to listen very carefully and really value the few words that he would very carefully communicate to us.
In 1981, two colleagues, Phil Dorr, who was a faculty member in my department at NC State, and his then graduate student, Jay Carter, had started a project on red-cockaded woodpeckers. There was not a single increasing population of red-cockaded woodpeckers. Everybody thought they were headed for extinction. And the deal was, Jay and Phil were handling the endangered species conservation kind of part of it, and I would study the social system. The red-cockaded woodpecker is unique in being the only woodpecker species in the world that nests exclusively in live pine trees. There's a good reason that most woodpeckers do not make cavities in living pine trees. It's really hard to do. Most woodpeckers can carve out a cavity in a dead tree or dead wood in a matter of days to weeks. Red-cockaded woodpecker, we're talking about years to make a cavity. When I started working on them, the average here in the Sandhills was 13 years. My idea was, well, maybe if we put cavities out there, we could increase numbers. I naively thought people will really like this idea. But to my surprise, when I pitched that idea to them, I was told that's probably the dumbest idea that we've heard in our careers, that you would make cavities for a woodpecker. I went back to NSF, wrote a proposal, got funding for another 3 years from them. Here in the Sandhills, where we are today, we set up 20 sites. So up on a ladder with a power drill, what could go wrong, right? That was the idea. And we put these in, and then we had 20 controls, and we got 19 out of 20 new groups. Occupied 0 for 20 in the controls. And at the time, that was the largest increase ever recorded in a red-cockaded woodpecker population, and this was over a 2-year period. So we went from no populations growing anywhere to showing that this might actually work. A lot of people were still very skeptical that this would work on any kind of large scale, but there were 2 places that were interested in seeing if it would work. Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune in coastal North Carolina and Eglin Air Force Base in the Panhandle of Florida were really interested in us coming in there and doing that. The issue with military training and RCW recovery was that because so little was known or understood about why the red-cockaded woodpecker continued to decline, there were a lot of rules in place about what you could and couldn't do near them. They really wanted to recover the species. They wanted to get on the right side of that equation, so we just started off doing it, and to their credit, they were fully committed to it from the beginning and have never changed. Still, to this day, committed to it. If we look at what has happened under the new management paradigm, first at Camp Lejeune, started out with 26 family groups. We have over 140 now. At Eglin Air Force Base, we had a little over 200, have over 500 now, and that population's been declared recovered. More than 70% of the populations of red-cockaded woodpeckers increased.
I would definitely say that study he did and his understanding of RCWs was what shaped that recovery plan and made it so effective.
If you make me talk about this too much, I'll start crying. It's just, I never imagined, when I started out that, again, it was just curiosity at first. I love studying animals. I never imagined that I would do something that had an impact.
Penguin poop always gets a bit of a laugh. When penguins get together, they poop all over the pebbles.
We call them guano stains, please.
Oh, so what is guano?
Poop.
Poop.
Poop. You can see the areas where the penguins have been breeding because it's just covered with poop, and that poop is red, and it's really distinctive from the rock surface that's around it.
We're not relying on seeing individual penguins, but we're relying on seeing this guano stain that they leave on the landscape.
When I was a grad student at Michigan, I was studying vegetation from space. And one of the advisors on my dissertation committee, he, at one point or another, he asked me the question about whether you could see penguins from space. And it seemed like satellite remote sensing would be the ticket. I published a paper on the measurements that I made saying that, yeah, this could be feasible. This is a CCT, a computer compatible tape. So this was the technology in the 1980s. And if you wanted to actually collect the data to do a full continent search for Adelie penguin colonies, we need a stack of tapes about the size of a tall tree. And then, of course, each tape cost $3,000. If you needed 200 or so, and that would be $600,000 worth of tape. And of course, everybody loves penguins, but nobody loves penguins that much. The technology just wasn't there. It was impossible. I put this on ice until 2008.
I don't want to do science in a vacuum. I want to do science that is sensitive to the ongoing debates that matter to the environment. That's very much been the driving force of my own work in Antarctica. Now, this is the traditional way that we count penguins. We actually go to Antarctica and we count them one by one. But this is incredibly labor intensive, and it's just not possible to survey all of the penguin colonies in Antarctica that we need. So I started digging through the literature, and I found these old papers from a researcher named Matt Schwaller. Now, these papers were from the mid-1980s. I just sort of assumed that Matt had maybe retired or had just completely stopped thinking about penguins.
Yeah, well, I was not living under a rock, but I was busy with the other aspects of my career. After 2008, I could just pick up as much data as I wanted for free on a fairly high-speed internet connection. So all of a sudden, boom, I had, unlimited data.
So I remember distinctly that first phone call that I had with Matt that was like, talking to one of your idols, because his initial work had been so critical to my thinking about how we might use satellite imagery. And so we've been working together ever since, I think almost 14 years now. We wrote this proposal to NASA to expand our work and to build a decision support tool that would make sure that policymakers were getting as close to real-time information on penguin populations as possible. When this grant was ultimately funded, we had the opportunity to bring on a postdoc to work on that project, and Chris was the perfect person to take that role because of his background in statistical modeling and computer programming.
What I really like is trying to have a model of why something is happening biologically and to formulate that model using statistical language or statistical models. That guano stain or poop stain on the ground is proportional roughly to the number of birds that are breeding at that site in a year. If we can say something about how the populations of these birds are changing over time, we can potentially say something about something larger about what's going on in marine ecosystems.
And so the goal was to create a browser-based tool that anybody on the internet could go to, and they could immediately find the best available information on how many penguins there are in Antarctica, how their populations have changed over time, and what we might expect for the future. We completed, I think, the first version of this tool in around 2016, 2017, and it's been in regular use by policymakers since then. So one of the big decisions that policymakers need to make is to design what are called marine protected areas. It was clear that there were some enormous penguin colonies in this chain of islands called the Danger Islands.
There were just, I think, 200 or so pixels on that one island. It turned out to be a really big colony.
And in response, the marine protected area for the western Antarctic Peninsula was expanded by something like 2 million hectares to include the Danger Islands. The Danger Islands was such a nice example of how when we discover things, we can make sure that the best science is actually driving the conservation and management decisions.
It's really been just a thrill and an honor, and just personally rewarding to work with Chris and with Heather.
So it feels pretty good as a scientist to know that the work I'm doing could have these impacts.
We're just sort of at the beginning of what it means to do ecology from space. There is a very active community of ecologists that are now using satellite imagery to track everything from, elephants to, walruses. Matt was way ahead of his time, thinking of this in the mid-1980s, but I think the computation and the computing power and the availability of imagery has really caught up with this, kind of quirky idea that we might be able to see penguins from space and actually use that for conservation.
This approach to AI has been used in products in ways that people don't realize.
When you do a Google search, when you want to find a photo on your phone,
we can talk to our cell phones and they will respond to us as though they understood what we actually said.
That's all done by neural networks. In future, much more is going to be done by neural networks.
Those services that you're aware of and the way they operate today wouldn't be the way they are were not for this technology. My dad absolutely never set out to, build a company or build a technology or build something like that. My dad set out to understand how people think and learn. And eventually he figured out that this what we now call neural network approach, was a real superior way to sort of model and then understand and explore human thinking and learning.
I use neural networks because I'm interested in how our minds work. So Dave Rumelhart and I started working together in the late 70s.
In the late 1970s, almost everybody in conventional AI thought that using neural networks was just nonsense. David Rumelhart's major contribution was that he rediscovered and pioneered the use of the backpropagation algorithm, which is a very effective way to learn complicated neural networks, and is actually the way all these current large language models are learned.
A neural network is like a network of people who are all friends sending messages to each other, except they send very simple messages. They either get more excited or calm down a little bit. If there are neurons in your brain that do these jobs, there must be some learning process that tells our neurons how to wire themselves up to build that neural network.
In your brain, you have a lot of neurons. They have connection strengths between them. And when you learn, you change the strengths of those connections. And the backpropagation algorithm is a way of deciding whether, if you increase the strength of a connection, it'll make the neural network work better or worse at the task you just gave it. So let's take an example of you have a neural network and you'd like it to say yes if there's a bird in the image and no if there's no bird in the image. But what you really want to do is show it an image of a bird and then ask the question, how do I change the strength of the connections so the feature detectors are better at detecting birds? That's what backpropagation does. It sends information backwards through the network to figure out how to change all the connection strengths to make it better at giving the right answer.
Basically, the purpose we had for forming that group was to demonstrate the usefulness of these neural network kinds of models. In the end, it turned out to be a 2-volume pair of books called Parallel Distributed Processing. The breakthroughs that we had in the 1980s were very exciting to people for several years. And there was this wave of interest in neural networks that carried into the late 90s. Then it began to fade. The learning algorithm that Dave and Jeff had introduced seemed like it wasn't powerful enough, or it was so slow that it could never solve the problem.
In computer science, people lost interest in neural networks because they discovered other methods that worked about as well on small data sets. And at that point, nobody had any really big data sets.
The thing is that the computers started to get faster.
So work done by my students in 2012 was what really broke the dam. That's when huge numbers of computer scientists suddenly started believing, hey, these neural networks really work. They managed to use NVIDIA GPU boards to recognize 1,000 different kinds of objects using a database developed by Fei-Fei Li that was big enough so that neural networks really worked much better than any other technique.
It produced a very big improvement in one step compared to the state of the art before that, and suddenly it got everybody's attention around these ideas again. My hope and expectation is that we will come to see neural network-based artificial intelligence systems as resources that sort of leverage our own human capabilities.
I absolutely think about my dad when we think about AI today. There's a direct line from the work that he did to some of the most advanced AI technologies now.
If you look at any of the really big breakthroughs, they come from basic scientific curiosity. But once the basic science had been done, that has clearly led to an industry which now people think of as a $1 trillion industry.
And it's certainly a lesson I've learned in life that basic research is invaluable.
I think federal funding of basic science improves our understanding of nature, improves our understanding of the natural world, and that's intrinsically valuable in its own right.
You never know where it's going to go. It's where discoveries happen. New areas of knowledge are opened up. And then those can have applications.
So curiosity is what drives scientists, and they do their best work when they're trying to solve puzzles that they're really curious about. That's the goose that lays the golden eggs.
How about that? Bring our 2024 awardees up and present them with their Golden Goose Awards. First, we're going to invite breakup of AAAS, Barbara Snyder of AAU, to help us hand out the awards tonight. Sudip, Barbara. Pretty good stories, huh? Is it not bad?
Those were amazing.
Yeah, not bad. All right. Our first award this year goes to Jeff Walters. 40 years ago, as you saw, he set out to study the breeding and habitation patterns of the red-cockaded woodpecker, endangered species of the bird. He found a way to assist that by creating artificial cavities, as you saw in the trees. Technique was adopted by the military and other areas of the Southeast, resulting in a comeback for the species. So, welcome to the stage. Take a picture. You can cry now if you want. Okay. Our second awardees are Heather Lynch, Matthew Schwaller, and Chris Cecastaldo. The team developed a way, as you saw, to use satellite imagery to track the bright pinkish red poop of those penguins that led to the discovery of 1.5 million previously undocumented penguins, a whole new way to monitor wildlife in Antarctica because of their quest for this discovery. This method has helped scientists track other animal populations and help the federal government make valuable field research expeditions much more targeted and efficient. Please welcome Dr. Lynch, Dr. Schwaller, and Dr. Che Castaldo to the stage. This is a group photo. The final recipients of the 2024 Golden Goose Award are Jay McClelland and Jeffrey Hinton and David Rummelhart. Decades before artificial intelligence emerged as a platform for innovation that it is today, as you saw, this team developed the parallel distributed processing framework to explain human cognition. They had limited success in using models based on this framework to develop artificial intelligence system until the 2010s, when, as you saw, the breakthrough was achieved that has since led to this explosion of technological advancement and trillion-dollar growth in a new sector of the economy. So please welcome Dr. McClelland, Dr. Hinton, and Dr. Rummelhart, who is represented here by his two sons, Peter and Carl, to the stage for their award. Thank you both. And now is the time when we get to have a discussion and hear a little bit more about the awardees and their stories. So I'm going to run over here and pick up this other. And welcome to you all. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
How about one more round of applause for everybody? All right, Jeff Walters, I'm going to start with you on the whole woodpecker thing, right? Is that okay?
That's okay.
I mean, that is just amazing. What a great story. You love woodpeckers. We clearly get
I do. I love them more than ever now.
And specifically the red-cockaded woodpecker. How'd you choose the red-cockaded woodpecker? Why that one?
Because of its unusual social system where some of the young birds, when they leave the nest, instead of going out on their own, they stay with their parents and help raise brothers and sisters, sometimes for years, and trying to understand why it is that they do that, and most other woodpeckers don't do that.
So as you said in the video, some people laughed at your idea when you first started out. That may sound familiar to other scientists who have been down this road. What role did federal funding play in your work?
Well, the initial funding that I got from NSF enabled the project to keep going in the first place. I joined Jay Carter and Phil Dorr. They'd been working on the birds for a few years, but their funding had suddenly been cut. And so that project would have lasted 5 years, and now instead it's lasted 45 years because of NSF keeping it going. And then NSF was the only one that would fund the next phase where we actually tested the artificial cap.
How'd that help you sort of overcome the skepticism and the doubt and all the kind of laughing that was out there?
Because we proved that it worked. I mean, the idea was that these birds are staying at home because they're waiting for a territory that already has these cavities. They're a critical resource. And staying at home with your family, being protected at your family till you have a chance, does it. And we thought that controlled their populations, and people were very skeptical of that again, because like woodpeckers can make their own holes, but it turned out that it worked, and once we demonstrated it worked, then it was a total paradigm shift from what the management approach was before that, and then a new paradigm after that. That became policy, and they're going to actually be downlisted to threatened in October. So
Wow.
they're not going to be endangered anymore.
That's great. That's great. All right, let's turn to artificial intelligence now. And let me start with Peter and Peter and Carl, David's sons. We saw a lot of your dad throughout that video, but perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about him and what he might say if he were here with us tonight about this.
Well, he'd be honored, surely, but I think he would want everyone to reflect on the power that asking basic questions has. And he's a psychologist. He wanted to understand how people think, how people learn, and just had a passion to understand it. And, well, guess what? If you understand learning, you can understand how to teach, even including machines. But I think he would really kind of bring us back to the core questions of science and ask us to focus there.
I'll echo that. I think Dad was most intimately wanted to understand learning, and I think that the where that's gone with Jeff and Jay and his students has really sort of just been an added benefit. And I think it was really trying to really understand learning that was most driven him, and I think he would want to remind everybody about that.
Was this constant conversation at your dinner table?
Yeah, actually, well, I mean, yeah, I mean, scientific family and put a sort of focus on there, but I think they sort of never questioned why this kind of work mattered. It just was sort of so obvious that you should have a passion for learning what's going on in the world, and you should focus on it, and that you didn't think about it in some kind of mercenary way or some kind of negative way or even a competitive way, even though my dad was an extraordinarily competitive person in his own sense, but it was compete with not knowing something, compete with your own ignorance and strive to overcome that. And those big problems were problems that, fortunately he made some progress on and has had a pretty exciting impact.
And please pass the salt.
Pass the salt.
Jeffrey, Jay, did you ever foresee that your work on human cognition would have the kind of impact that we're seeing now?
I guess we knew that in the long run, if we were successful, it would have that impact. But it was a long time coming.
Very long time. So, right, I mean, you couldn't have imagined what we're now seeing, the speed we're now seeing at that time. So what was that impact that you imagined in those early days?
No, you could imagine this would happen. It was clear that in the long run, if you could understand how the brain learned and how people learned, you'd be able to make machines that learned the same way and perhaps better.
Jay?
I had a different experience. I wanted to understand the human mind from the beginning, and I was inspired by ways in which we were different from the machines that I knew about when I was in graduate school. And I think that was really true of David as well. The work that we did together in the late 1970s was really about how do we allow many, many factors that are sort of percolating in maybe the back of our mind or in the context that we're in, sort of somehow affect the way we're thinking and make us start to see the world a little bit differently. And it was really about this notion that, like, whenever you're reading a word or you're trying to understand a sentence that you're looking at in a book, you're integrating information from many, many different sources at the same time. That led us to the idea that we needed to start thinking about how all these different, like, neurons in your brain might be working together to sort of help tell each other what to do. And I myself was always interested in getting a deeper understanding of that, like how our brains are solving the problem. And I just want to say that. I'm saying this to you all tonight because I think that our brains are solving these problems in ways that are very different from the way our machines are doing it now. They may be contributing a lot to our technologies and so on, but there's still an amazing amount of wonderful science to do to understand more about how our brains are solving intelligence. So I want to just make sure everybody hears that message here tonight.
So, and the bottom line is we'll still need human brains.
And we'll need basic science funding to support research about the neural basis of cognition and the factors that give rise to our thought process.
Okay, this is amazing. This is amazing, but some would say we've saved the best for last. Penguin poop. So it's very true, Heather, that, and you mentioned this in your research, that you want to do research that has an impact. Satellites in the South Pole can seem pretty far removed from our lives here. So think about and tell us a little bit about the impacts that have come from your work that you're proudest of.
Sure. Well, we told a little bit of that story in the video, but you know, Matt, and with his work, and then adding in some of the work that I was doing on a different kind of satellite, we just started scanning the whole Antarctic continent for penguins. And Matt and I were sort of going back and forth where his algorithm would find some penguins, and I'd go look at, you know, my satellite images and see what we had. And Matt had sent me an Excel spreadsheet of all the pixels that he had identified with penguin guano, and there were a whole bunch there that he'd flagged as, well, look, the algorithm's not working here, and we need to figure out why. And I went in the high-resolution imagery, and my head just about exploded because I realized that, no, these were not the algorithm not working. This was the algorithm telling us that we had some of the largest penguin colonies in the entire world that had never been discovered in this area of the Danger Islands. And pretty much immediately we were able to put together a team to do the first expedition to the Danger Islands and drone survey these and to get the first population counts. And was mentioned in the video, immediately got that information into the hands of policymakers who were at that very time trying to set the boundaries for these marine protected areas that left the Danger Islands out because no one thought there was anything there to protect. And so kind of making that connection, and now these Danger Islands are protected as an Antarctic specially protected area, and they're on their way to be protected as a marine protected area. That's that kind of connection between basic research and application that, you know, you would dream about.
Amazing. So Matt, Chris, you're working at the intersection of ecology, satellites, and statistical modeling. I'm wondering what draws you to these techniques to study the natural world, and what we gain by incorporating these methods in addition to the in-person field research that we still do and still need to do.
Well, using satellites to observe wildlife from space, you can study animals at very large spatial scales in almost near real time. So it allows you to see things at scales that really matter biologically. It comes with a lot of challenges. Observing animals from space, as you can imagine, is a pretty imprecise activity. And so incorporating the uncertainty in that process and models really keeps me up at night. So I focus on a lot. And then doing it at scale in a reproducible way is also something that's also really challenging. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few words about developing the algorithm back in the 1980s when it was a fairly primitive time. The satellites had just been launched. And there were a lot of inhibitions to actually making progress in developing the algorithm. And certainly one of them was the fact that the data cost money. You had to pay for it. If you didn't have the cash, you didn't have the data. So if I can make a plug to our policymakers, it's that please, you know, make the data available, make it free, because that's the best way to make progress in science.
So a couple questions here for the group, okay? I mean, one of the things I love so much about Golden Goose, and I love so much about this conversation, and I love so much about conveying to people who don't work in the sciences, is this idea of serendipity, this like amazing thing that suddenly the light bulb goes on, or you have your aha moment, or whatever you want to call it, and just stroke of luck, whatever it would be. And I'm wondering, you know, what moments, what aha moments you might have had, and if you could share a few of them with me and how your work might have progressed if you hadn't had those moments. Who wants to go first?
Well, obviously, the big aha moment was finding all those penguins in the danger islands, but it's worth just emphasizing it's not just penguins, actually. In the Antarctic alone, we're using this technology for flying birds. Matt and I have worked a lot on a bird called the Antarctic petrel. We use it for seals. We're on the verge of doing the first pack ice seal surveys that have ever been done. We can see whales under the surface of the ocean, and we can start surveying whales for the first time at scale. So I think this aha moment is that it's not just sort of a party trick, but it's actually a new tool that could apply to a number of different animals in the Antarctic and elsewhere.
My daughter's a marine biologist, and one of the things she's done is tag sharks, like big sharks, to see where they're going, and she sent me this picture, and my aha moment was her telling me that they really don't want to eat people, they just want to eat seals. She's in her wetsuit. She looks like, if I didn't have my glasses on, she'd look like, you know, a sea lion or a seal to me. My aha moment was, please don't do that again. How about yours? Grab the mic.
Well, there were a couple of them. The most memorable moment was getting the phone call from one of my graduate students we were monitoring when we did this experiment, because, mind you, we put holes in 2 trees in 150 acres. That's the modification we did. Their family territories are very large, about 150 acres. And my graduate student managed to find a phone booth in the middle of the pine forest somehow, because she couldn't wait to get back to civilization, to call and say she'd just gotten to a tree and there was a bird there and it was using that cavity. And I would say the other one is when we ran the data on it, because we keep track of all the cavity trees. Each group has 5, 6 per group. And we realized how long it takes them to make a cavity. Like 13 years.
That's incredible.
They're always working on them. And the aha moment was like, this is a really important resource. No wonder they want to get a territory that already has them. And instead of moving in and, all right, I'm making a cavity, a few years I'll have one because the male will start it. No female is going to live there. Like, they visit, like, so what kind of territory you have? Well, I have this cavity. And then I have like an open concept sort of place for you up in the trees there. No. So that was an aha moment. Like, these are really important. And they can be inherited, and we also discovered that they can use the same cavity, if it's a good one, for 20, 25 years once they make it, which is also unusual. Woodpeckers usually only use it a couple times.
Did you say that your graduate student found a phone booth and called from a phone booth?
Yeah.
So when you're done with this, you could be a historian or something.
Yeah.
Remind people what phone booths are.
Yeah.
How about serendipity on the AI side?
Can I just say one thing about this that I would like to share with the group, which is that I always felt that my most favorite aha type moments came in a conversation with a colleague. With David and I we were trying to work out how to get our neural networks to settle. And one of us would say something, and then the other one would say, oh, maybe we should try that. And that was what worked. Or Jeff said something to us at a research meeting one day about how, you shouldn't just make up your learning algorithm. You should derive it from a goal that you have. David listened to that, I think that was an aha moment. And so I would say that science is a parallel distributed processing activity that comes from the synergy of ideas among people many times, and that those aha moments arise out of those kinds of things.
Jeff, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I agree with what Jay said. That's it's often in discussion with other people. For me, the biggest aha moment was realizing that if you got backpropagation to try and predict the next word in a sequence, the learning algorithm would actually learn the meanings of the words that came before it. Because the only real way to predict the next word is to understand what was being said. And on a very small scale, we got that working in 1985. And that was actually the initial version that led to all these large language models, where now it really works. It really understands what you're saying in order to predict the next word.
Let me give you the last word on the serendipity here thing, thinking about your dad and what your dad would have seen as serendipity in this process.
100% it's about other people. I think that there's no possible way that this science happens by a single person. And the opportunity for graduate students, for postdocs, for other faculty members was always the thing that was exciting to him. And there were all these stories I would hear from his students and others that come and say, yeah, it was that time when we were in the conference room and said, who has got data? And let's talk about it. That I think led to serendipity for him, but I think for a heck of a lot of other people. And they would say, the serendipitous moment was when I went to talk to Professor Rummelhart, and he gave me something that stuck with me for a long time.
Well, I want to say that what we've heard here tonight are truly amazing stories. Amazing stories from the science, amazing stories from the scientists and the sons of scientists. If you have a word you want to add.
I just want to acknowledge something. For me, an aha moment, and this is coming from a person who lived through Dad's evolution as a scientist and as a person and working with his colleagues, but was actually, interestingly, an event organized actually by somebody in the audience here, Bob Glushko. And when I went to the inaugural, what is now known as the Rummelhart Prize, which is, and this is a prize for people working in cognitive science, and there were hundreds of people there, and they were all interested in what Dad and his colleagues had been doing, and that was an aha moment for me. I was like, oh, wow, coming from, I'm a scientist, but this is part of the science that I'm not involved in, so I really enjoyed that.
Well, we've heard how we've pushed the bounds of our capacity and intelligence using our neural networks, how we've discovered millions of birds that help us preserve those and other species, and how we've saved a species through your incredible work. So would you give us one more gigantic round of applause? Congratulations to our awardees. Thanks to you, to the members of Congress, to our sponsors, AAAS, AAU, our distinguished guests, our audience for being here, for joining us online. Please join us at the reception for those of you who can. And let's just say that this work must continue. We must support you. We must tell your stories. We must engage the public, build public support for this, because you will continue to help advance the human and the planetary cause. Thanks to you all. Thanks for a great day.